In 1931, a Kentucky mountain man named Elias Coggin fed a family of 9 through the worst winter of the Depression using nothing but copper wire, hickory saplings, and a pocket knife. Today, wildlife biologists call his methods primitive. But here is the twist. Recent studies from Virginia Tech show some of these old Appalachian traps outperform modern hunting gear by a country mile. Number 14 on this list was so effective, the federal government cracked down on it in the 1970s because it threatened entire fur companies. And number 3, researchers have just discovered it exploits a quirk in animal behavior no modern device can replicate. These 25 tools were not sport. They were the invisible economy of a whole region. The difference between a family eating supper and going to bed hungry. Before we start, hit that subscribe button. Let's count down 25 forgotten Appalachian tools that kept families alive. Number 25, the figure 4 deadfall trap. Before Walmart sold mouse traps, every boy in the hollers of eastern Kentucky learned to whittle a figure 4 before he learned to write his own name. 3 sticks, notched at precise angles, held up a flat rock or a split chunk of hickory. A squirrel, chipmunk, or grouse brushed the bait stick, and the whole thing collapsed in half a second. The genius was the triggering geometry. The upright post, the diagonal, and the horizontal bait arm formed a number 4, and the slightest tremor dropped the weight. A good trapper set a dozen figure 4s along a ridge before breakfast. It cost him nothing but time and a sharp Barlow pocket knife. Pap Coggin reportedly caught over 200 gray squirrels in a single autumn using nothing else. Modern trigger pans still operate on the exact same physics. They just cost $12 a piece now. Number 24, the Paiute deadfall, a close cousin to the figure 4, but fast and trickier. The Paiute used a short toggle and a piece of string or rawhide, letting the bait stick swing freely until an animal so much as breathed on it. Appalachian trappers learned this one from trade catalogs and old trapper manuals passing through the mountains in the 1920s. The Paiute's advantage was its hair trigger sensitivity. A mink or weasel, far too cautious for a figure 4, would fire the Paiute without hesitation. The weight came down in a flash. A boy could build one in under a minute with nothing but a jackknife and a scrap of twine from the flour sack. When the fur buyers rolled through the mountain towns each December, paying 40 cents a pelt, a trap line of 30 Paiute deadfalls could mean a new pair of boots for every child in the house. Number 23, the rabbit gum. Hollowed out of a section of black gum log or chestnut, the rabbit gum was the signature Appalachian trap from the 1850s straight through to the 1960s. A family would cut a 3-foot section of hollow log, fit a trap door at the front, and rig a falling peg at the back. The rabbit hops in, nudges the trigger, the door drops, and the rabbit is caught alive. No blood, no damage to the pelt, no bait required, because rabbits naturally seek tight hiding spots on cold mornings. Granny would check the gums before dawn in December, her breath ghosting out in the blue light, and come home with 3 or 4 cottontails for stew. The black gum wood lasted decades in the weather. Some families kept the same rabbit gum for 3 generations, the wood worn smooth by 100 frightened paws. The wooden rabbit box was a cousin of the rabbit gum, sawn and built rather than hollowed. Mountain men in Tennessee and western North Carolina built box traps out of sawmill scraps with a sliding plywood door, a trigger wire, and a bait stick baited with apple slices or sweet potato peels. The box had 2 advantages over the gum. It was lighter to carry, and it was easier to mass produce. During the Depression, Whole counties in West Virginia ran trap lines of 50 or 60 wooden boxes, with children responsible for checking them before school. A single winter could yield 200 rabbits per family. Fur sold for 15 cents apiece, and meat went to fricassee with onions and biscuit dough. The box trap vanished when rabbit populations crashed in the 1970s from pesticide runoff. The skill vanished with them. Number 21, the twitch-up spring snare. This is the one your granddaddy probably showed you and swore to secrecy. Bend down a green sapling, anchor it with a trigger stick, and tie a copper wire noose to the top. When a rabbit or groundhog puts its head through the loop and yanks the trigger, the sapling snaps upright. The animal goes with it, lifted clean off the ground, dead in seconds. Here is the pattern break. The sapling has to be exactly the right springiness, too thin, and it bends without snapping back, too thick, and it will not release. Mountain trappers used hickory saplings 2 years old and 3/4 of an inch thick. They learned that exact measurement by feel after 1,000 failed sets. Researchers at West Virginia University tested the twitch-up against modern cable restraints in 2019 and found the old sapling snares had a higher catch rate because the pull-up motion prevents escape, something no staked snare can replicate. Number 20, the copper wire ground snare, the bread and butter of Appalachian trapping. A length of soft copper wire, about 24 inches, twisted into a noose and hung across a game trail. Copper was chosen because it was silent. It held its shape when bent, and it did not rust. It was salvaged from old barn wiring, from discarded telegraph line, or bought at the feed store for 8 cents a yard. A good trapper could set 50 snares on a single ridge, checking them on a circuit every morning. The snare had to be exactly 4 fingers off the ground for rabbits, a hand's width for groundhogs, and knee-high for fox. Those measurements were not in any book. They were passed from grandfather to grandson while kneeling beside an actual trail. When synthetic cable replaced copper in the 1970s, the catch rates dropped. Copper, it turned out, absorbed animal scent and actually drew curious wildlife closer. Number 19, the willow fish basket. Down in the creek bottoms of eastern Tennessee, families wove long funnel baskets out of green willow shoots. The basket had a cone-shaped inner throat. Fish swam in chasing bait, could not figure out how to swim back through the funnel, and piled up by the dozen. A single basket set overnight in a smallmouth hole could yield 10 or 15 sunfish and bass by morning. The weaving itself was an art form. Some baskets took 40 hours to complete, and a good one lasted 3 or 4 seasons before the willow rotted through. Ministry of Agriculture officials tried to ban them in the 1930s, calling them destructive to sport fishing. The mountain families ignored the ban because sport fishing was not a concept that applied when your children were hungry. Today, the weaving technique survives in maybe a dozen households in the entire Cumberland region. Number 18, the stonefish weir, older than the willow basket by 1,000 years. Cherokee families taught early Scotch-Irish settlers to build V-shaped walls of river stone across shallow creeks, funneling fish into a narrow trap at the downstream point. The weirs in the French Broad River still stand today, some over 400 years old. During spring spawning runs, a single weir could trap bushels of red horse suckers, drum, and walleye in a single night. The technology was so simple it humbled modern fisheries biologists when they studied it in the 1990s. Here is what blew them away. The stones were positioned at angles that created hydraulic patterns fish naturally follow. A Cherokee weir did not fight fish behavior. It used it. Modern concrete dams have destroyed most of them, but in remote valleys of the Smokies, you can still see the V-shaped lines of moss-covered stone where families once fed entire settlements. Number 17, the trot line. A long rope stretched between two banks or two trees on opposite sides of a creek with baited hooks dangling every 3 feet. Set at dusk, checked at dawn. A well-placed trot line on the Clinch River could pull up channel cats weighing 20 pounds. Now here is the wild part. Food historians at the University of Kentucky documented that trotline catfish supplied nearly 30% of the protein in some mountain households during 1933 and 1934. Your ancestors were not starving because they knew where to tie their ropes. The bait was chicken liver, crawdad tails, or bits of soap. Yes, soap. Catfish are scavengers, and soap bars have rendered fat in them, driving cats into a feeding frenzy. Store-bought lures cost money. Soap cost a nickel and lasted a month. When commercial catfish farms took over the market in the 1980s, the trot line became a relic. Number 16, the jug line. Lighter than a trot line and cleverer by half. An empty milk jug, a long line with a single hook and a small rock as an anchor. Toss them into a farm pond or slow-moving creek at sundown. A big catfish takes the bait, and the jug starts bobbing and jerking across the water like a dog on a leash. Next morning, you row out in a john boat and collect your jugs. Each one, a fish bigger than your forearm. Mountain families would run 20 jugs on a pond and wake up to enough catfish to feed the family for a week. The beauty was its cost. Nothing. Every household had empty jugs. Every creek had fish. A boy of 8 could manage a jug line by himself, which meant Dad could stay at the sawmill and the family still ate. The technique survives in rural Arkansas and Mississippi, but it has mostly vanished from Appalachia. Number 15, the bush hook or limb line. First pattern break. This is where we stop talking about traps and start talking about something close to witchcraft. A limber willow branch hangs over a creek, bent low, with a short line and a single hook tied to the tip. Bait the hook, then walk away. When a catfish or snapping turtle takes the bait, the branch bends double, then slowly lifts the fish clean out of the water as the branch fights to spring back. The fish drowns in air. The branch does the work. No one stands guard. Bush hooks could be set by the 100 along a single creek bank, and a good trapper walked the bank at first light, harvesting fish like apples. Here is what nobody talks about. The bush hook is so effective that it is illegal in 38 states today. Not because it is cruel, because it catches too many fish, too reliably, and state fish agencies simply cannot compete with the spring force of a mountain willow. Number 14, the hand-forged steel leg hold trap. Before Newhouse and Victor mass-produced them, Appalachian blacksmiths forged their own steel traps one at a time. Each trap had a maker's mark stamped into the pan. Some of those old forged traps from smiths in Virginia and North Carolina still function today, 120 years later, buried in the rafters of tobacco barns. A good steel trap cost $2 in 1930, which was 2 days' wages. But a single trap could catch 80 muskrats in a winter at 40 cents a pelt. Do the math. This was investment-grade equipment. But here is what the regulators never admitted. A properly set leg hold, placed in water so the animal drowns in seconds, is actually more humane than most modern snares. The mountain trappers knew that. The bureaucrats did not. Number 13, the Conibear body gripper. Invented by Frank Conibear in 1957, this trap revolutionized Appalachian fur trapping almost overnight. Two steel jaws, powered by heavy springs, were designed to kill the animal instantly with a clamp to the neck or spine. The 330 size, as big as a steering wheel, could take beaver and otter. The 110 size fit neatly at the mouth of a muskrat run. Old-timers resisted the conibear at first. It was expensive and dangerous to set. If your finger slipped during setting, it could break your hand. But the body gripper's kill speed was unmatched. A muskrat hit by a 110 size trap was dead before it knew the trap had fired. By 1970, the conibear had displaced most other trap types in West Virginia and Western Virginia. It is one of the few old tools on this list still in wide use today, though the number of active trappers has dropped by 90% since 1980. Number 12, noodling for catfish, also called grabbling or hogging, depending on the holler you came up in. You wade into a muddy creek, reach your bare arm into a submerged log or rock hole, and let a 30-pound flathead catfish bite down on your hand. Then you haul it out. Sounds like a joke. It was not. In Tennessee and Kentucky during spawning season, entire families noodled up dinner. Uncle Boone would stand waist deep in the Cumberland, shoulder deep when he had to, with a grin and a bite mark from last year still visible on his forearm. The bite feels like being hit with a hammer wrapped in sandpaper, but the catfish does not let go once it clamps, so you just squeeze back and lift. Noodling requires nothing but bare hands and a tolerance for pain. It is illegal in most states now, legal in about a dozen. Your great-grandmother probably did it anyway. Number 11, the frog gigging pole. A long hickory shaft, usually 8 to 10 feet long, tipped with a 3-pronged iron gig forged by the local blacksmith. On a warm summer night, 2 people would pole a john boat along the edge of a pond, one paddling, one holding a carbide lantern. The light froze the bullfrogs in place. The gigger thrusts the prongs. The frog comes up. Dinner is served. A single good pond could yield 40 frogs in a night, enough legs for a Sunday fry-up that fed 20 people. The gig heads were heirlooms. Your grandfather's grandfather might have forged the same 3 prongs you used in 1955. When the pesticides of the 1970s decimated bullfrog populations, gigging collapsed. In my grandmother's county, there were 7 active giggers in 1960. Today, there is 1. Number 10, the slate turkey. Call. Now we enter the sacred ground of Appalachian hunting, the art of calling turkeys. A small disc of slate, rubbed with a striker made of hickory or dogwood, produced a yelp, a cluck, or a purr so convincing that a spring gobbler would charge from 300 yards. The slate had to be cured just right, scratched in a circular pattern with sandpaper, and kept dry in a leather pouch. Mountain turkey hunters in the 1920s made their own slate calls from roofing slate or even old blackboard fragments. A skilled caller could fool a wild turkey better than any factory-made electronic call. Here is what nobody teaches anymore. The sound of slate on slate matches the resonant frequency of a real turkey's syrinx, the voice box. That is why it works. Box calls and push-button calls mimic the sound, but the slate call reproduces the actual acoustic signature. The old men knew it by ear. Number 9, the wingbone yelper, second pattern break. This one is hauntingly beautiful. A turkey call made from the actual wing bones of a harvested turkey, cleaned, boiled, glued end to end, and sucked like a kazoo. The sound comes from drawing air through the hollow bones, producing a high, keening yelp that sounds exactly like a lovesick hen, because it literally is a turkey. Cherokee hunters taught settlers this technique in the 1700s. and it survived in isolated hollows until the 1950s. Every successful turkey hunt produced the tools for the next one. A wingbone yelper took about 2 hours to make, using only bone, beeswax, and patience. When modern mouth calls arrived in the 1960s, made of latex and plastic, the wingbone faded. Today, maybe 50 people in all of Appalachia know how to make one. It is not taught in hunter safety courses. It is taught still on front porches by grandfathers to grandsons willing to listen. Number 8. The box call. Hand-carved out of butternut or cedar, the box call produced rasping yelps by scraping a chalked lid across the rim. Henry Gibson of Virginia built his first box call in 1897, and the design has barely changed since. A well-made box call was louder than a slate, perfect for calling across long ridges and valleys. Every serious turkey hunter in the mountains owned at least two, tuned to different pitches for different weather. The pitch depended on humidity. A damp morning called for a lower-toned box. A crisp morning wanted a sharp, high yelp. Mountain callers learned these adjustments from their fathers, not from magazines. The box call is still made today, but the old hand-carved ones fetch $400 at estate sales. Mine belonged to my great-uncle. It still calls in gobblers every April, 90 years after he carved it. Number 7. The possum roller log. A hollow log propped on a slight incline with bait placed at the lower end. The possum walks in, trips a simple loop trigger, and the log rolls sideways, pinning the animal against the ground. Simple, silent, and cheap. Possums themselves were not much prized for meat, though the old-timers ate them baked with sweet potatoes on Christmas Eve. The pelts were what mattered. A possum pelt brought 35 cents in 1945, and a farm family with 10 roller logs could pick up $2 a week extra during fur season. That was grocery money. The roller log vanished when trapping licenses became required, and most mountain families refused to pay. The skill of rigging the trigger, a delicate balance of forked sticks, survives today only in the memories of men in their 90s. Number 6. The squirrel pole. A long sapling leaned against the trunk of a hickory or oak known to have a squirrel nest, with small copper wire nooses tied along the topside. Squirrels naturally use the easiest route up and down a tree, and that sapling became the superhighway. They would stick their heads through the nooses at a run. By evening, a good pole yielded 3 or 4 bushy tails, enough for squirrel dumplings. The squirrel pole was a boy's trap, cheap, quick to set, and low enough off the ground that a 10-year-old could harvest his catch. In Clay County, Kentucky, in 1938, a boy named Ray Morris paid for his mother's winter coal with what he earned selling squirrel meat to the boarding house, all of it caught on 3 squirrel poles leaned against 3 hickory trees. Number 5. The deadfall log trap for bear. Third pattern break. This one was not for the faint of heart. A heavy log, 20 feet long and 8 inches thick, propped overhead with a triggered stake system. A bear, going for the bait, usually a fish head or honeycomb, pulled the trigger and the log dropped with enough force to break its spine. The deadfall log bear trap was used in the Smokies and the Blue Ridge from the 1820s through the 1930s. My great-great-grandfather reportedly took 3 black bears with a single deadfall in one autumn in 1887. That was enough bear fat to fry cornbread for a year, and enough meat to smoke hams that fed 2 families through winter. Bear hunting with deadfalls was eventually outlawed for conservation reasons, and the populations slowly recovered. But the knowledge of how to set a log trap that actually worked without killing the trapper? That died with men born in the 1890s. Number 4. The smoke out for groundhogs. When a groundhog dug a burrow under your bean patch, your granddaddy did not call an exterminator. He stuffed a smoking rag soaked in coal oil into the main entrance and plugged the other holes with dirt. Within minutes, the groundhog came staggering out the one remaining hole where a waiting shovel or dog ended the problem. The smokeout fed hundreds of mountain families in the 1930s. Groundhog meat roasted with sage and onions tasted somewhere between pork and dark meat turkey. The fat rendered into a grease sold to wagon makers for axle lubrication. Nothing was wasted. Today, you cannot legally smoke out a groundhog in most states without a depredation permit. In 1934, you just did it and served dinner an hour later. Number 3, the Salt Lick ambush stand. Here is where modern science caught up with mountain wisdom. A handful of rock salt placed in the crook of a fallen tree, replenished weekly, became an irresistible attraction for deer and elk. Hunters built blinds 30 yards away and waited in silence at dawn. A properly located salt lick could produce a deer sighting every single morning. Researchers at the University of Tennessee studied salt lick baiting in 2021 and found that deer visitation rates triple within 2 weeks of consistent salt placement. The old mountain hunters knew that instinctively. They placed their licks at the convergence of 3 game trails, always downwind of the prevailing breeze and never on the ridgetop. Modern wildlife officials call it baiting, and it is illegal in most states. But for a century, it was how mountain families put venison on the table. Not sport, survival. Number 2, the walnut hull scent mask. Dozens of green-black walnut hulls, crushed and soaked in water for 3 days, produced a dark brown liquid with a sharp, woody smell that completely masked human scent. Mountain hunters rubbed the liquid on their clothes, their boots, and their hands. Deer could not smell them coming. The tannins in walnut hulls also stained clothing a dark olive brown, providing camouflage as a bonus. Modern synthetic scent blockers from hunting stores cost $25 a bottle and do not work as well as a dozen walnut hulls that cost nothing. Why? Because walnut scent is native to Appalachian forests. Deer grew up smelling it. They ignore it. Nothing in a modern bottle matches that. The walnut hull trick was taught to settlers by the Cherokee in the 1700s, and it survived in the mountains until maybe 1970. Now most hunters have never even heard of it. Number 1, the coon dog and bell system. The final entry is not a trap at all. It is a partnership. A trained coon dog, usually a black and tan or a treeing walker, wore a small brass bell on its collar. The dog ranged through the bottoms at night, tracking raccoon scent. When it treed an animal, the dog stood at the base and bayed, and the bell jingled with every bark. A hunter half a mile away could hear the distinctive rhythm and know exactly where his dog was. No GPS, no radio collars, just a 20-cent brass bell and a dog worth a month's wages. A good coon dog in 1945 cost $40, when the average mountain family earned $80 a month. But that dog paid for itself in a single winter, treeing up to 100 coons at $3 a pelt. The bond between a man and his coon dog defined Appalachian hunting culture. It was not equipment, it was a relationship. And when the state pushed through leash laws and fur markets collapsed, the whole tradition unraveled in less than 20 years. The last great Appalachian coon dogs died with the men who loved them. The bells hang on nails in barn rafters, silent, waiting. Here's my challenge. Try one of these this year, not the bear deadfall, obviously, Walk a creek at dawn and look for the stone weirs your great-great-grandfather's Cherokee neighbor helped him build. Hang a limb line where it is still legal, rub some walnut hull on your hunting jacket, and tell me if deer do not stare right past you. Then come back and tell me I'm wrong. Tell me your granddaddy was just being nostalgic, or tell me he actually knew something we forgot. I have a hand-forged trap in my shop that still closes clean after 90 years. I have my great-uncle's box call, and it still calls in gobblers. These were not just survival tools. They were a whole way of being in these mountains. Your grandfather knew. Now you know too. Drop a comment below and tell me which tool your family still remembers. I want to hear it.